Good evening. I'm John Bailey. This is People to be Heard, the program where people who have something to say have their say. Tonight, you've got Westchester County Assistant County Attorney for 29 years, John Vorperian, and also White Plains TV host of Beyond the Game. And he has been honored as winner of the Frontline Professional of the Year by the Eastern Regional Interstate Child Support Association for his work for the county in child advocacy. He has just returned from Slovenia in the Balkans, shown here, where he was the only American attorney to attend a conference at Nova University, shown here, on the future of the European Human Rights Court. So, John, quite an experience, and you were invited by Judge Zobek of the Slovenia Supreme Court, right? And what was his hope in involving a U.S. lawyer like yourself in the ramifications of attacks on the European Court of Human Rights?
Well, John, thanks for inviting me onto your show to chat about this important subject. Jan and I know one another from the Federalist Society. That's a organization comprised primarily of libertarian and conservative attorneys that look to courts to follow the rule of law, to have judges who stay within the bounds of what the statutes and case law say. In other words, non-activist judges. And Jan and I, there is an international segment to the Federalist Society, and Jan and I hit it off a couple of conferences ago where we talked about a number of subjects that we don't hear enough in the American media, because here in the U.S. we tend to focus on what goes on in New York, Washington, D.C., and in our 50 states, but there's a whole world out there. And Jan and his wife Barbara, who also serves on the Slovenian Supreme Court, extended an invite if my wife and I were ever in the neighborhood to stop by, and it just so happens as this summer vacation we decided to go to Munich, Germany. I let Jan and Barbara know that we were going to be in the area, and they said, you got to come to Ljubljana. We did. It was a pleasure. It was a social occasion, and I recommend to all your viewers to go to this cosmopolitan city to enjoy its charm. I can talk more about that, but with regards to the law conference, as Jan was picking us up from the airport, that's when the invite happened. And Jan has known me with regards to my concerns of raising global awareness and global recognition of the Armenian genocide that took place in 1915, which created the diaspora of Armenian peoples around the globe, and I'm one of them. I'm a descendant of a survivor, and he knew that human rights was important. It's something that I studied, human rights law I studied at Pace Law School, which is now the Elizabeth Hub School of Law here in White Plains. And I had to take him up on the offer to hear Philip Leach, probably the foremost authority on human rights law. He's a professor at Middlesex University, London, England, as well as he's the director of the Human Rights Advocacy Center.
There's a picture of you and him right up there.
Yes. After the lecture, like true collegiate academics, there was an opportunity to go to the local tavern and debrief on the talk that Leach gave on his assessment of where the status, the future for the International Court of Human Rights
in Strasbourg, France.
That's correct, Strasbourg, France. It is not part. People should be aware that we're talking about a entity that was created to enforce human rights law, and it involves not the 28 countries of the European Union, or I should say it does include those, but also is actually 47 nations belong to this convention and this judicial system. So you have countries that are begging or petitioning to become part of the European Union, which are already affected or should be affected by the rulings of the International Court of Human Rights.
Yeah, here's a picture of the court building.
Okay.
Should be coming
okay.
up. There it is.
Oh,
right.
okay. Yeah, that's right.
Right. Hopefully spelled Strasbourg right.
That's
But,
right.
Yes.
And Professor Leach has appeared there, as well as his papers with regards to claims against Russia, Turkey, and the United Kingdom, where there have been questions of violations of human rights, and I can talk further about that. But
is there a backlog at the court?
Yes.
How long is the backlog?
You know,
Large.
it is not. From what I gathered, and I was sitting with Slovenian law professors, lawyers from Slovenia who have brought claims in the court, and it sounds as though there are delays. I couldn't estimate the timelines. What I am amazed at, or was absolutely shocked, was that the court has issued rulings, and there are nations that just simply say, well, that ruling is void, or have ignored.
No teeth.
Yeah.
No
and
teeth.
And unfortunately, the league leader is Vladimir Putin's Russia, and as well as Turkey. Here in the West, or I should say in Western democracies in Europe, there's another tack that they take with regards to detoothing the court, where you have Putin and Russia and Turkey and those countries ignoring court rulings. Those countries have also said, you know what, we're cutting or defunding our
this was
contributions.
what Mr. Leach talked about.
That's right. He went into the stresses that are being placed upon the court, and
such as
defunding or withholding of funds is a
what are the funds used for?
Running the court,
paying the judges.
Well, paying
Perhaps,
the judges,
yes,
your office, the whole process. We know that money is the mother's milk of politics.
Money talks, or you don't walk.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can't run a government. You can't run a system without funding. There is a different tack that is taken in the West, and this is the one that really was appropriate. Is that in the United Kingdom, you have media outlets tripping over one another to run with sensational headlines about the court's decrees. There was
which
one
are unkind towards them, right?
Right,
Yes.
right. But you have screaming headlines. There was one that Leach showed and talked, and I don't want to malign the wrong newspaper, but it was, I've forgotten whether it was the Daily Mail or the Daily Express. But the screaming headline was 3 out of 4 rights cases go against the United Kingdom. Now, we have to put that in perspective. And Leach's, Philip's point, which is well taken, is that over 97% of the petitions submitted to the court are summarily dismissed. So we have to...
Is there a reason for that?
Well, I'll get into that in a moment, but
Yeah.
the volume going in is, it's looked at and gotten rid of. So what you have presented before the court, or what the court is dealing with, are cases of merit. So that 3 out of 4 is not exactly correct. There's more explanation to it, but it's a better headline and gets people to buy newspapers if it's, what? We're at 75% always against the United Kingdom. Good golly, I got to put my pence down and buy that paper, find out what's going on. But that is the sort of perennial media blitz that's constantly put on the court.
If they don't like the decision, over here you can appeal, but you can't appeal that decision, can you?
It's
No.
well, there is an appeal process, and I've whether you have what we would term in U.S. law as an opportunity to re-argue. Philip did not go into that aspect of the talk, but the talk was to really highlight the difficulties that the court is facing, as well as those that bring claims against the court. There is a problem with evidence, and in talking about evidence, he highlighted what had happened in the Ukraine, where you have a civil war going on between nationalists who want an independent Ukraine and those that are really backed by, again, Vladimir Putin and
forces of Putin, who wants to reassemble the USSR.
Well, he may even want more than the reestablishment of the Soviet Union in this person's estimation. But there you had vanishings. You had commandos, clearly Russian military, but their nameplates blacked out, hooded, middle of the night, going and taking opposition leaders out of their Ukrainian homes, and then that presents a problem. Identification of the assailants, witnesses. This is in the middle or early in the morning. This whole problematic difficulty in pursuing these claims. So
and you have to have witnesses about that. You have to have videos.
You have to have something.
It's very tough to assemble a case like that and live.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. You're putting your life at risk.
Exactly.
Going against the forces of evil.
Yeah. What I did learn was apparently to present a claim, the claim could be as simple as something. I'm characterizing it, but simple as something on a piece of notebook paper. The court will entertain such, but if you don't have further bolstering and documentation, and how are you going to achieve affidavits of witnesses?
Intimidated, no doubt. So, is the court in danger of just disappearing?
That's a good question, John. I think from what I observed in my time in Eastern Europe, there, the former Yugoslavia, we went to Slovenia, we traveled to Croatia, and did drive it around in Slovenia, and Jan did point out some things to me, and you mentioned it earlier. There is a resurgence of wanting to go back to the old ways. There is a resurgence of
communism.
Yes. When I was there, a red star, a tower of a red star, was just appeared out of nowhere over the weekend. It was approximately, I would say, 100 feet high, in a portion of Ljubljana where at least 5 roadways converge.
Where you were.
Yes, in the capital, and where 5 roadways converge, and it's a main thoroughfare to negotiate your way, whether you want to go on to Austria or whether you want to shoot down to Croatia. And there was no explanation as to when, who, what, how, why did this appear. But that is a symbol.
An anecdote of what's happening.
It is. Yeah. It is, and it's there are various symbols. The hammer and sickle is a sign of communism, but the red star there takes on so many. It takes more impetus.
The swastika.
Well, yeah.
This hammer and sickle was the swastika of the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, yeah.
to say the least.
Well, it may be right now. That's a
It's
reoccurring
big
icon.
big comeback. Now, this week there was a front page article that appeared in the New York Times describing how Hungarian strongman Prime Minister Viktor Orban, if we can see the article on the slide there, has, through proxy investors, businessmen. Now, isn't it strange how in this country the Trump rise was fueled by businessmen extensively? But anyway, that I digress. So Orban has, through proxy investors, established television outlets that supported the newly elected Prime Minister of Slovenia, the right-wing candidate, nationalist, and Janez Janša. And he was quite, the article was chilling to me. And did you find that the media covered the conference well, or was it not covered?
Well, there was no, I detected no media there. If there was a print journalist, I was not aware of anyone who was media in attendance.
Yeah. Where's CNN when you need them?
Well, that's a question for CNN.
Who is editing these news networks that would ignore something like this?
Well, to put it in perspective, this was at Nova University in Ljubljana. The university is one of the few private universities there. Everything is public, state-run, state-owned still. So this is a university which appears to be embracing what we're all about of Western democracies, the rule of law, judicial precedent, an independent judiciary. So I was not shocked that the media wasn't there. But the only good thing that one of the good things I saw was that the law students, I was surrounded by 25 to 30 plus year-old adults who embrace the Anglo-Saxon judicial system.
Western progressive thought.
Yes.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
As opposed to Western regressive thought.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Yes.
And actually, I have to compliment Jan. I went into his chambers and I was able to meet his law secretaries, and they were all young women who clearly have the same judicial philosophy.
Young, brave women.
What?
Young, brave women, I might add.
Yes.
In that part of the world.
In that part of the world, yes. I mean, this is something else. Jan Zobek was on the Constitutional Court, which is Slovenia's highest court. He was
sort of like one of the 9.
Yes,
Yes.
it is like one of the 9.
Yeah. Supreme Court justices.
However,
in the
he
United
now finds himself back at the Supreme Court level. It is the equivalent of here in this country, a Supreme Court judge being
demoted,
being put back on the federal.
So he has suffered reprisals for his raising awareness of the court's problems.
Yeah, well,
in the European Human Rights Court.
Yeah, well, that is.
Or am I reading too much into what you're saying?
Well, from Jan's perspective, and you should have Jan on the show when he is back here in the USA
we'll
in
have
November.
to Skype him one of these days.
That's a possibility, but with regards to whether he's brought human rights claims, that's another topic that Jan and I have to have. But what we discussed was last December, Jan made news in Slovenia where he's always bringing in lawyers from other countries to see the Slovenian judicial system, and he was bringing a attorney from another country into the courthouse, and he was going into his chambers. Judges' chambers are sacrosanct. Yet there was for lack of a better term, court officer
Yes.
who stopped and wanted to perform a strip search, which it's uncanny. Can you imagine stopping Sonia Sotomayor going into her chambers and some bailiff saying, "Wait a minute, I want
tell
to."
you that's coming.
I don't know. I don't know about that, John. But
I hope not.
yeah.
But I don't like the way directions that we're going.
Yeah.
But so he's been Judge Zobek, I believe, has been personally censured by the Slovenian government.
Well, that was that's out there in the media matrix, but it's been, I believe, reversed. I know that with regards to that incident I'm alluding to, Judge Zobek got the result that he wanted, which was essentially a ruling by the head administrative judge that no, a judge's chambers are sacrosanct. Is a sanctuary. You do not interfere with a judge going in and out of their chambers.
Wow, that would scare me to death if I was in that position and that happened to me.
If you're adhering to trying to just administer the law and stick to it, I would be nervous.
Yeah. Now it hardly seems that it's been 28 years since the 10 years of the Balkan Civil War. Is the Prime Minister of Hungary, do you think, attempting to reunite Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo in some sort of bloc again? Via media instead of actually armed force? Hypothetical question.
It's a hypothetical, and I think it's too soon to read the tea leaves. There is the possibility that this new right-wing nationalist that won the election in Slovenia,
Janez Janša.
Janez Janša, he's going to have to form a coalition government, and at this stage, as we're taping this today, the other political parties are indicating that they won't join in such an alliance. Maybe they're hoping for a second bite at the apple. That's something you can do in parliamentary elections, but we'll see.
Well, as we all know, compromise when you're dealing with people who have an agenda, and the more you compromise, the more you're gradually losing ground.
Yeah.
Which we have seen.
Yeah.
And now, is the nationalist anti-immigrant attitude one of the issues that was really stressed in what the Hungary Prime Minister did on his news outlets in there? Do you think, is this flooding Middle Europe, fanning a swing in anti-immigrant sentiment? Is it prevalent in Slovenia from what you could say?
Let me answer the question this way, because being the American over there, it was to be a social vacation, and I really wanted to stick to that. And I did get to other countries, visiting other friends and acquaintances and family. And just as much as I want to avoid folks asking me about our current occupant in the White House, I wanted to tread lightly with regards to the migrant issue.
Here's a shot of some of your friends that you met over there.
Oh yes, yeah. That's dead center with me is to my right. That's Philip Leach, the professor at Middlesex University, and
far left.
And the far left, yes, that's Jan Zobek, Supreme Court judge. His wife Barbara was about to join us. This is clearly after the lecture, as you can judge by the number of beer steins that are empty there. My wife Milder is on the far right, second from the right there. But the attorneys who were present, we talked about, they were sharing with me some of their claims that they brought to...
such as?
Well, the gentleman in the bright blue shirt to my right brought a claim with regards to a Slovenian policeman before the International Court. At least if I heard him say it was Slovenian, but the point is a policeman. And what the Human Rights Court is dealing with is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I encourage folks to take a look at it, because unlike here in the U.S., we have the Declaration of Independence, which we have that key phrase of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights enumerates 30 specific rights that humans have. The point that the gent was raising with me is that there was a violation with regards to this individual's human rights, and the court did render a decision, but the decision was one sentence, a denial. And that I found to be one of the criticisms that came from the audience of other lawyers who have brought claims where the court...
In the Slovenian courts?
No, the International Human Rights Court,
good.
that it will give a one-line sentence to its decision. And this is also something else that I heard about the Slovenian courts, that when they make a decision, it is an indication that this is the court's decision. Here in the U.S., whether it be the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, when there's a decision rendered, you have a majority opinion, you also have a dissenting opinion. And the point is that sometimes the dissenters, those that object to the court's decision, sometimes that becomes the law. And if you don't have that fight of intellectual discussion and going back and forth,
dialectic along, so to speak.
you may not progress. You may not help society.
Let's see, we have about 30 seconds. What would you like to say about the situation in a nutshell regarding the European Human Rights Court? Something to watch. Carefully.
Something to watch. I would just encourage that the present administration just simply take a step back, take a look at our alliances. It's great that the president is sitting down with North Korea, but please sit down, don't bolt from the G7, and also just reaffirm our transatlantic conference. Europe counts. If we cut ourselves off from Europe, we're just an island.
That's right. Well, John Vorperian, human rights advocate, you have been heard. Thank you for joining us on the European Human Rights Court issue. John Bailey, good night for People to be Heard.